How did the Afghan-Soviet War contribute to the rise of the Taliban? Have you ever wondered how a war from decades ago could shape the future of a nation? The Afghan-Soviet War, which lasted from 1979 to 1989, played a key role in the rise of the Taliban. Let's break down how this conflict influenced Afghanistan and the broader context of global communism. The Soviet Union intervened in Afghanistan to support a communist government that was struggling against opposition. This was in line with the Brezhnev Doctrine, which allowed for Soviet intervention to protect socialist regimes. However, the Soviet military faced fierce resistance from the Mujahideen, who were Islamic guerrilla fighters. These fighters had been present before the invasion but gained strength as they opposed foreign intervention and communist rule. The Soviet campaign aimed to maintain control, but they struggled, especially in rural areas. The Mujahideen movement intensified, and they received support from external sources like the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States and Pakistan's intelligence service. This support complicated the conflict and fueled the resistance against the Soviet forces. As the war dragged on, it devastated Afghanistan's infrastructure and society. When the Soviet Union withdrew in 1989, the communist government in Kabul became weak and eventually collapsed. This left a power vacuum and led to civil war among various Mujahideen factions, creating chaos and instability. In this turbulent environment, the Taliban emerged in the early 1990s. They were primarily made up of young Pashtun students from religious schools in Pakistan and former Mujahideen fighters. The Taliban promised to restore order and stability after years of conflict among warlords. They advocated for a strict interpretation of Islamic law, drawing from Pashtun tribal codes and conservative religious beliefs. From the perspective of the Soviet Union, the Afghan-Soviet War was an attempt to defend a socialist government and prevent Afghanistan from becoming a base for anti-communist forces. However, the intervention ultimately failed and contributed to the rise of Islamist groups like the Taliban. This outcome highlighted the limits of Soviet power and the complex dynamics of Cold War conflicts. The legacy of the Afghan-Soviet War includes a significant decline in communist influence in Afghanistan. The war created conditions that allowed the Taliban to gain popular support as a force promising order and Islamic governance. The chaos left behind by the Soviet withdrawal and the collapse of the communist regime set the stage for the Taliban's rise as a dominant political and military force in the region. In summary, the Afghan-Soviet War contributed to the rise of the Taliban by attempting to sustain a communist government amid internal resistance and regional Cold War competition. It provoked a widespread Mujahideen insurgency that grew stronger during the Soviet occupation. The political fragmentation and instability after the Soviet withdrawal created a power vacuum that the Taliban exploited. The war's legacy reflects the decline of global communism and the unintended consequences of foreign intervention in Afghanistan.